honestly, the only way this is going to change is by hitting these employers in the pocketbook and standing up for our rights and getting out of victim mode. We need to stand up and say, no, we're not going to work in unsafe working conditions. No, we're going to not volunteer to work without malpractice coverage. No, we're not going to, when they're paying $13,000 a week to NPs and PAs. No, we're not going to do it for free. No, we're not. I'm not going to intubate somebody without PPE. You just need to say no. Unfortunately, there's going to be collateral damage. But if we lose a doctor, that's a doctor that would have taken care of a panel of thousands of patients per year for the rest of their lives. And no, we cannot. People need to stand up and say no and protect themselves. You're of no value to anyone else if you're not breathing.
Welcome to the Licensed to Live show, where professionals, doctors, champions, VIPs, attorneys, and those in public office discover strategies that help you restart and gain what is lost when you find yourself accused. If another has doubted your integrity, questioned your credentials, or caused your actions to come under scrutiny, you are in the right place. On the other hand, if you have never felt the knot in the pit of your stomach when legal papers are served, the heartbreak of disappointing your family when the lock clicks shut on handcuffs, or had to appear before a board of review, then be aware, the longer you serve, the more likely you are to find yourself under the microscope of those who judge. Prepare yourself for this uncomfortable possibility. Now, here's your host, Dr. Jarrett Patton.
Welcome to episode 65 of License to Live. My name is Dr. Jarrett Patton, and I'm your host for our journey together today and every day you choose to listen to this show. If you or anyone you know has been dissed in their career, please invite them to join us along this journey. Just go to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you get podcasts, subscribe so you can get the latest episode right to your phone. When I say dissed, I mean disengaged, this medicine thing isn't what I thought it was going to be. Too much paperwork, too much administrators and insurers telling me what to do. I just don't think I'm with this anymore. Or dissatisfied, I just don't feel like I'm living up to my full potential. This just isn't doing it for me anymore. Disgruntled, like being a doctor has taken too much of my life away. I am in debt up to my eyeballs from med school, and now they want how much more money for MOC? Or disenfranchised, like I was when I had my medical license temporarily suspended. Today, we will be speaking with Dr. Pamela Wible, a physician, a prolific author, and she is featured and really the star of the documentary about physician suicide, Do No Harm, exposing the Hippocratic hoax. And now, a word from our sponsor. Emmett Hayes III Coffee Company, EH3, specializes in selecting 100% Arabica coffee beans from distinct coffee growing regions across the globe. EH3 Coffee Company offers an exclusive brand of organic coffee beans and blends. All coffee products are craft roasted to perfection, which yields consistency and quality, taste, and optimal flavor. EH3's quest is to create an evolutionary coffee experience for every single customer, every single time. Get your coffee today at emmitscoffee.com. That's EMMITTSCOFFEE.com. Welcome to License to Live, Dr. Wible.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Jarrett.
This is such a pleasure to have you live on the show as we're recording this episode today, but really realizing that back in 2018, I had the privilege to interview the director and producer of Do No Harm, Robin Simon, and last year I met her at a Philly area screening of the film. So I am so thrilled that I got to see the film. I received the message well. And now the next step seems to just be bringing you on the show and getting some of your input today. So thanks again for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having this. I think the more voices we have on these taboo topics, the better.
Absolutely. And this is the perfect place for it. I know you come from a legacy of doctors in your family. You even grew up near where I am now in the Philadelphia area. But to start things off, let's talk about what got you to study about physician suicide.
So I was suicidal as a physician, and I thought I was the only suicidal physician that ever lived on this planet. That was in 2004. I was in bed for 6 weeks, severely depressed and suicidal. And looking back at that, how horrifying that I thought I was the only one. Never in my medical training and medical school or residency did they ever say Dr. Suicide out loud. Never did they ever mention that we were at high risk for mental health issues. My parents never mentioned this to me and their physicians. 8 years later, it took 8 years after surviving my own suicidal thoughts to finally realize, after we lost 3 doctors in my small town to suicide, that I wasn't the only one. We lost 3 doctors in just over a year in my small kumbaya farmers markets on every corner, Eugene, Oregon town. And sitting in the second row of the memorial for the 3rd doctor that we lost. And these guys weren't fringe characters. They were like heads of departments, you know, they were top of their game guys who just were alive one minute, dead the next. And nobody saw it coming. Sitting in the second row of this last guy's memorial service, I started counting how many people that I knew in medicine who had died under either highly suspicious circumstances for suicide or proven suicide, right? And I knew 10. And I thought that was really weird, sitting in a memorial, you know, like that moment in your life where the light goes off, the light bulb goes off in your head, and it almost feels like your head's going to explode. Yeah, that was the moment, October 28th, 2012 at 3 p.m., when I realized I wasn't the only one. The guy at this funeral wasn't the only one. The 3 men in my town weren't the only ones. And in fact, both men that I dated in medical school died by suicide, not while I was dating them, but, you know, as successful physicians leaving their wives and children behind. So I sort of felt like I was tapped by the universe to deal with this since everyone else was running away from it. You know, I felt like I was the only one attracted to this topic. I needed to know, I think it's just common that somebody who's survived trauma needs to know, like, why it happened. Like, I need to understand why my friends are killing themselves.
Absolutely.
Just for me, you know, to answer it for myself. I had no idea this would contribute to my profession. This would help anyone else. I wanted to know why my friends were dying.
Credentials verified.
And that led you on a long journey of finding out case after case of people you knew, people you didn't know. And let me tell you guys out there, if you guys are listening, most everyone should know someone that has at least contemplated suicide, if not completed it. Unfortunately, a lot of time these cases are covered up. And being med staff president in my past, there were suicides that happened on our medical staff at times. There weren't always large announcements. People didn't necessarily memorialize. It was something that just kind of happened and life moved on. You have taken the stance, Dr. Wible, to really shine the spotlight on this. Almost you could, I don't want to use light of the word, but it's really an epidemic.
Yeah, it is an epidemic. And we've known that doctors have a high rate of suicide since the 1800s when it was first reported in the literature. And so here we are, you know, more than a century later, and people are still tiptoeing around that giant elephant in the room, which is the dead bodies of our colleagues, you know, in their 20s and 30s and, like it's horrific. And one other thing I want to bring out, just that's pretty timely now, is people are really upset in New York City because of these resident deaths due to COVID that are being covered up with gag orders. And they don't seem to understand, like, is it just a rumor? Are they really muzzled? Da, da, da. And let me just tell you, from working on this for 8 years, I can guarantee you that hospitals go into these non-disclosure agreements, gag orders, all sorts of, they've even threatened me, and I don't even work for them. I mean, what nerve do you have to try to threaten me? And I don't even live in your state, and I'm not even an employee. So, go ahead and try it. You're not, threatening me is just going to make me work harder to take you down. So don't try it. Okay. That's my message to medical institutions. And, we have free flow of information on social media. And yeah, I don't appreciate that these resident deaths are being covered up, whether they're COVID or suicide. There's a lot of reasons why people need to know what's truly going on in our hospitals, because lives of the most caring, new crop of doctors are being destroyed every day in our hospitals. And they have no legal advocacy. They have no support for the most part. That's why they call me. That's why I'm running a suicide helpline.
And tell me, I mean, the COVID pandemic has really changed the way we operate in medicine altogether. People are forced to work with minimum supplies. There are hazardous conditions and things that we wouldn't even dream of, let alone taught how to deal with in school.
I think it's the pandemic Pandora's box. It's opening up and allowing people to see what's always been going on in medicine, which is our best and brightest have been left in harm's way, destroyed by human rights violations and hazardous working conditions that are rampant in our hospitals. And now the whole world can bang pots and pans and look inside at least a little bit.
Yeah, and see how this is happening. I mean, there are a lot of doctors who are strongly standing up. They're exclaiming that they don't have what they need to get their job done. And I hope that they're able to make their point, let everybody see this light and live on another day and continue to work as they want. But we know a lot of times bad things happen in these situations, or these doctors are gotten rid of, or something else happens that message just doesn't get out. It's really has a capped lid on this. But have you been seeing an increase of calls to your hotline during the pandemic?
Yeah, it's about double what it usually is. And there's a lot more nurses call. I've never had so many nurses contact me. So yeah. And people are, and I've also never had the terrifying feeling of trying to call somebody back and them needing to text me because they're short of breath. And so trying to do kind of a suicide helpline through text while somebody's short of breath in bed on their back is nerve-wracking, to say the least.
Incredible story. And you're right, it is nerve-wracking, but it really speaks to the severity of the situation and how much this is changing our life. And it's really putting a spotlight on lots of insufficiencies within the healthcare system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, quite honestly, the only way this is going to change is by hitting these employers in the pocketbook and standing up for our rights and getting out of victim mode. We need to stand up and say, no, we're not going to work in unsafe working conditions. No, we're going to not volunteer to work without malpractice coverage. No, we're not going to, when they're paying $13,000 a week to NPs and PAs. No, we're not going to do it for free. No, we're not. I'm not going to intubate somebody without PPE. You just need to say no. Unfortunately, there's going to be collateral damage. But if we lose a doctor, that's a doctor that would have taken care of a panel of thousands of patients per year for the rest of their lives. And no, we cannot. People need to stand up and say no and protect themselves. You're of no value to anyone else if you're not breathing.
You're absolutely right. You have to take care of yourself. If you're not here and not able to help, you're not helping anybody. So this is sad, and it's very severe. You mentioned even earlier about human rights violations. In one of your books entitled human rights violation in medicine has had a particular impact on many people because you really frame a different terminology around what's going on. And a lot of the things that you highlight all too often seem to be common practices in hospitals and medical groups and health systems. So talk to me more about these human rights violations and what are some of the most common violations you see today?
Well, I think the most common is something, and by the way, I want to just share that this is a grooming process. I want to preface it with that because abuse is always a grooming process. Like, for example, with incest, you might wonder, how did that 10-year-old girl end up with her 55-year-old uncle? Well, that doesn't just happen out of the blue. That's a grooming process that starts with the balloon and a special whatever else. They're bringing lollipops, take you to the movies, suddenly you're like getting fondled, So the thing is, you take these young, malleable, do-gooder humanitarians who are not too wise up on life, and you put them in this almost like a cult. People have described medicine as a cult. It's, they're disconnected from their friends, family. They're working the equivalent of 2 to 3 full-time jobs, 80 to 120 hours a week, even with this artificial cap, which is the honor system unenforced, and people get in trouble all the time for quote unquote violating their work hour restrictions. So that's another way to blame the victim. Ridiculous. So basically, these people are working the equivalent of 2 to 3 full-time jobs and on shifts that are like legally allowed to be 28 hours long or unlimited without justifying why. So, I don't think I need to say much more than that, except that we're not baking wedding cakes. We're dealing with gunshot wounds in toddlers and, 28 hours of telling people their family members are dying from COVID or gunshot wounds or anything else. The equivalent of 3, jobs, no time to eat, sleep, hypoglycemic, seizures due to sleep deprivation. Even if you think you can handle this, your physiology can't because you start hallucinating, you go psychotic, you get seizures. Like anyone will develop this if they're up long enough. And that's why pilots are only allowed to work 8 or 9 hours in a row. Even if they wanted to fly 28 hours because they love flying, they're not allowed. Truck drivers, I hung out at a local truck stop and asked them, hey, how long can you drive your truck without stopping? Well, after 7.5 hours, there is a alarm attached to their rig in the engine that goes off and makes them stop for at least a half an hour. You are not allowed to drive more than 8 hours in a truck. You're not allowed to fly more than 8 hours on a plane. So, the question is, why are we allowing people who are new doctors to work in life and death situations for more than 3 times the amount that any other profession that values safety is working? So that's the big question. But the answer to the question is this is cheap labor, and our own leaders have sold us out, and they're pocketing, very nice salaries while having us work less than minimum wage. So we're in a profession full of sellouts, actually, because they pit us against each other in medical school in a non-collaborative environment, in a competitive environment in which they take these really caring, kind, do-gooder humanitarian types and pit them against each other for their personal survival. So you feel like in order for you to succeed and get the residency you want, you have to step all over everyone else and crush all the people around you, which is not a natural way that human beings who are caring would respond, but they're left. And basically, they're controlled by fear, which is another thing that this pandemic does, is control us with fear and make people who are 80 years old want to come out of retirement to be heroes, which is the wrong idea because you're going to be dead. So try not to be seduced by fear. I can obviously talk about this for a really long time, and by the way, I didn't even mention racism, sexism, and all the other things that are human rights violations that people are more familiar with in lots of different work settings. That's just on top of the 100-hour work week.
And that's why, and you've laid out the case clearly, that human rights violations are really what we are talking about when we're talking about people that are abused in their workplace. They may not have the proper devices or systems to keep them safe in their job. I mean, we know we wouldn't send our military to the front lines without any kind of protective gear or something else. So this is a true terminology change when we're talking about human rights violations, because as you mentioned, every other industry has some regulation about, well, if you're going to be driving a multi-ton truck, maybe you should get some sleep so you don't fall asleep behind the wheel. And if people are making life and death situations in the ICUs, in the medical wards, you name it, they need to have a fresh mind. And if you've been up for that 24, 28, 32 hours and you're just kind of loopy, you're not going to be making the best decisions, but somehow that's okay. So I'm glad that you're bringing the light to this situation as well, Dr. Wible, because people are so used to being abused in healthcare that, well, they just think it's normal and then they just accept it without even thinking about exercising their rights or standing up and calling it out.
So about the PPE, I would say the personal protective equipment that's missing. When you have somebody, a lot of people are telling me they're not getting PPE, or they're getting, like this N95 mask that's meant for single use, and they need to use it all week or all shift. And they're doing intubations and codes with the same mask, from patient to patient. And that's really equivalent to asking a prostitute to use the same condom all week. So how's that going to fly? Is that kind of what we want going on in our first world hospitals?
Good question. I think everybody out there would say, no, we do not want it this way, but fair comparison nonetheless. Thank you for that.
The other thing I want to share is that, the people who are currently the workhorses on the front line are the residents, the ones whose deaths are being covered up by suicide and by COVID, because it would only draw attention to the true perpetrators of these human rights violations, which are their employers and medical institutions that like to give the image on the billboards that they're the most caring facility in town, but they'll allow their own to fall daily because there's a long line of victimized medical students and residents to replace them, including international medical graduates who ultimately get the very short end of the stick, but they're all willing to come in and be victims. All these people, by the way, lack informed consent, so they sort of don't even understand what they're signing up for till they're in there. And if you've not seen the research on telomere length, have you seen that on interns? And
Yes.
So what, you want to share what your understanding is of that?
And this is something I give in many of my lectures about child development. When I'm speaking at fathers and family conventions, and I throw up that old study from the 1950s that shows brain biopsies and neurons and what happens to your brain with the neurons, the amount of neurons, the density over time, and then even in comparison if you have lots of trauma in your life. And we are looking at now epigenetics, and we're looking at some of these things that change the way our bodies are actually working and functioning. And someone under chronic stress, we know they have poor medical outcomes. And again, working in this type of environment is another area of chronic stress.
So the telomeres, so that has to do with literally you're aging 6 times the rate of your peers, because they did the, blood test, checking your chromosomes before and after, and the telomeres, which are an indicator of your ability, your age, and an indicator of your stress level. If they're decreasing 6 times, like literally your DNA is aging 6 times the amount of your peers who are working at Starbucks or real estate agents or whatever. And so when you really conceptualize what's going on, these people have a weakened immune system, proven by their aging 6 times the rate that anyone else would in a year. And we are leaving them on the front lines without, condoms, essentially to work with infectious disease. So that's how we're treating our best and brightest humanitarians. As a culture, we sort of deserve what we get if we're not willing to protect the people who are supposed to protect us. And these people need to be protected with legal force, with, financial penalties to employers that kill them in wrongful death lawsuits and more, class action lawsuits for lack of PPE. And we're in a unique situation now where the public has a heightened level of empathy for doctors, and we need to take advantage of this window of opportunity to really share what's going on honestly. And I mean secret recordings. Everyone should be recording physicians, residents, their working conditions. Not that you need to turn that over to the media, but you might want to listen to it later. You might want to take notes. You might want to protect yourself from retaliation. There's a lot of reasons why people should be heavily documenting in every possible way the unsafe working conditions they've been left in medicine, because if there's any hope of changing this, it's going to come from the victims. This isn't going to change spontaneously without victims telling the truth. So this isn't a good time to just play nice.
Absolutely. You have to be willing to tell your story, or at least record your story. Because there will no doubt be further casualties from this, both in physical lives lost, but as well as careers destroyed as this. And as you guys know, we had the 4-part series looking at COVID and the pandemic. So make sure you check out those previous episodes, because there are tips in each one of them about, well, you want to make a statement, you want to stand up, and you want to be strong. But at the same time, you don't want to expose yourself completely. So you want to be able to tell this story. We need to stand up for each other. And as you have stood up for so many, Dr. Wible, you often are on the side of people maybe attacking you or disagreeing with some of the things that you say. I have to ask you, because I ask every guest that appears on this show, have you ever been dissed before?
Oh, no. Judgment.
Yes, I have actually been capital D-I-S, invited from speaking at the AMA. Okay. Yeah. And why it's called the AMA, I just have to say, AMA stands for American Medical Association and also Against Medical Advice. So I find it really kind of a weird, I don't know, that might not be such a great tagline there, but the fact that they disinvited me to an event. So this is, I've been invited to speak all over the place, and was doing a TED Med Talk, which I was honored to do, on physician suicide. And apparently every year the AMA will choose, 3 of the 50 speakers to come for an invitation only evening to Chicago to preview their TED Med Talk with, the uppity ups in the Chicago medical scene. And I was one of the 3 selected. And then, as we're making hotel arrangements and everything, come to realize that they didn't really understand my topic. They thought I was just going to talk about ideal medical clinics, which I have helped start all around the country. But when they realized I was talking about physician suicide, I actually was disinvited. And I've never been disinvited as a speaker before. Now, why was I disinvited? They said because they were uncomfortable with the topic of doctor suicide. Well, if you as an organization that's in a leadership position for physicians are uncomfortable with the idea that doctors are dying, and you're so uncomfortable that you're going to censor it, that raises a lot of questions.
That is a great diss, number one, disinvited. But coming from the American Medical Association, that's kind of tough to think that, well, you were talking about a real topic, a topic that, well, I certainly wanted to talk about on this show. And many people want to talk about it because we realize the importance of this situation. We realize how many lives are affected, not only those individual lives, but their families and those that they took care of professionally as well. So that we're talking about a lot of people being affected by this epidemic in regards to doctor and physician suicides. And they disinvited you. So I want people to understand people get dissed at every level at some sort of way, at some part of your life. And well, what did Dr. Wible do? Well, she just went on and kept doing what she was doing and continuing to speak out and speak up for what she believes is right.
And this just makes me more compelled to do what I'm doing. So I encourage people to diss me because that gives me power to want to continue amid the censorship, because the number one thing that I can't stand is censorship. Like that, out of all the human rights violations in that book, that is the one thing I would never agree to. I would sooner live in a tent, give up my house, I will never take down a blog post. Some people have left some really nasty comments on my blog. I won't censor people who are even being nasty to me. I just believe freedom of speech. I believe if you hate me, say it. If you love me, say it. If you disagree with what I'm saying, speak out. I want everyone to be heard. So the other thing that I want to say I've been dissed by.
Oh, no, not another test.
Is a small subset of female psychiatrists who are sort of in a weird turf war with me because they're like, why are you running a suicide helpline for doctors? That's stay in your lane. As in, like, I should just be doing strep throat and ingrown toenails and let the psychiatrists who haven't done much of anything about this since 1858 when it was first discovered as an issue, the doctor suicide crisis. Substantial, pressure, doing something, not just academic masturbation and another PowerPoint every once in a while. I'm talking about doing something to actually, root cause analysis. I've got 1,474 doctor suicides that I've investigated and done a root cause analysis on the first 1,300, which is what led to the book, Human Rights Violations in Medicine. That's the common theme. You don't have an amazing, brilliant group of 1,474 people just all die for 1,474 different reasons. You know what I mean? This is a professional assault on our humanity. And the root cause analysis reveals that human rights violations that they've sustained have put them over the threshold to the point where they want to take their own lives. We should be concerned about this, not having a turf war, because they don't think I'm somehow able or skilled enough to run a free suicide helpline for doctors. I don't know.
I have to say that your credibility is running sky high because you have done the work, you have done the research, you have looked into these yourself, and I don't see why anybody would be fighting over who should be doing that, especially if someone has the passion, they have the knowledge, and they have the leadership to do so. I am going to be behind you to carry on that torch and keep going on that, Dr. Wible.
Well, thank you. I think it just goes, that little part of dissing, that's more of a middle school mean girl routine that's going on, where I get banned from Facebook groups by, people who get upset that I don't like the word burnout and I use real terminology to describe what's going on, since they focus their entire career on writing research papers on burnout, they sort of can't have me in the group anymore. You know what I mean? Because I could
see how something like that might happen.
Stuff like that,
Yeah, I could see how stuff like that.
So then, what's concerning is, so I personally don't care. Hate me, I really don't care. I'm fueled by it. So go ahead and do it more. I don't. What I care about is apathy. I love conflict. It's apathy that kills me. So I would much rather have somebody trying to slay me online than just, have nothing happening. You know what I mean? Take a stand, love me, hate me, and be vocal about it. I'm happy to answer anyone's question about anything. But see, the thing that really disturbs me, because I can handle this, I have thick skin, I guess. But what disturbs me is when you have so many little cliquey subsets of physicians willing to infight with each other, we're never going to end up with a union. I know people are like, oh, we should unionize. I don't know how we can unionize when doctors keep getting kicked out of Facebook groups by other doctors, and I'm not the only one. And so as long as everyone's willing to be petty with each other and mean girl bitches, then I don't see how we're going to get anywhere with creating a true union, because we're all in this together. And apparently we all went into this to really help and heal others. So why should physicians be slaughtering each other?
That's right. It's an appeal to come together, folks. I mean, if there's a time to come together, to come make a statement, to stand up and be loud and proud, now's the time. So enough of the infighting, enough of the bickering, enough of the banning. Let's look at some of these issues as things that we can do together. We have to do this together. Where can people find out more about you, Dr. Wible?
idealmedicalcare.org, the contact page there. Anyone who contacts me who's struggling, I will return your call for free, and we will talk. And sometimes I'm on the phone for 2+ hours with people, who are contemplating suicide or thinking about quitting medicine altogether. Or, the other night I was on the phone with an Asian male doctor, and I didn't want to interrupt him very much because he kept going, and he shared that he's never disclosed any of this with anyone else on the planet. The pandemic pushed him to the point of wanting to call me, a complete stranger, and to reveal how it's felt to be a physician for him. And believe me, men are not as great as women generally at disclosing like deep feelings. And Asian males, I got a lot of friends. They tell me Asian men are not known for wanting to disclose deep, dark feelings. And physicians in general, not to generalize, but I'm going to generalize. Male physicians, they're the highest risk. 75% or more of the people on my registry are male physicians, and so, hey, if I'm on the phone with somebody 10:30 p.m. at night and they're on a roll telling me things they've never told anyone else, I'm certainly going to keep listening as long as it takes.
And if you need help right now, I have the links to everything we're talking about. You can reach Dr. Wible directly. Just click the show notes and get the help you need. This is serious. This is not the time to just push it away. I'll be okay tomorrow. If you're really feeling this way, you need to get help, and there are people out there to help you.
And this isn't something that sort of spontaneously just gets better. So if anyone's suffering, don't just think, okay, it'll get better. Just talk to someone. It doesn't have to be me. Talk to your pastor, talk to someone. But it'd be good to talk to somebody who has an idea about what goes on in residency. Some people who, when they go to social workers or people who haven't been through med school, they're having to sit and spend the first 15 minutes describing what a residency is. People don't get it. Talk to a peer that gets it.
Yeah.
Somebody who's in a life raft that doesn't have a hole in it. That's another thing these victims do, is they hold on to each other, but they're all in sinking life rafts together. So if you're trying to get support from other people on the Titanic, call for a new boat, call somebody who's resourced enough, who gets it and is resourced enough, who's not also sinking with you.
Ask for help, get help. And a lot of us are suffering together in this. We're suffering alone. We're suffering as a group. Just reach out. We have to start having these conversations somewhere. And now is the time, particularly in this age when things are just so rough. They're so uncertain. We don't know what things will be like, months down the road from now. But just know that there are people out there that are willing to help, that can listen, and there are brighter days ahead. You just need to get the help to get there. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our audience today, Dr. Wible?
The comeback.
Yeah, well, if you're having suicidal thoughts or have ever had suicidal thoughts in medicine, you can download Physician Suicide Letters Answered for free as an audiobook on my website. So I think, Ideal Medical Care, just click on books. that's like a free download. If you like the sound of my voice, I could lull you to sleep with suicide letter stories. But, I know it sounds kind of dismal, but most of the people who wrote me survived their suicide. These are suicide survival stories by and large, but I think you will find that you have camaraderie among, a book like this would have helped me when I was suicidal, since I thought I was the only one. So I think if you're not willing, because some people still are not sure about calling me or reaching out for help, like this is a way that you could get sort of 3 hours of a reality check with some, stories of optimism and survival from others of your peers who have felt the same way as you feel. So that's a good place to start. And then also the human rights violation book is really the book that's going to put you in the position of defending yourself. It's like the ultimate self-defense guide for anyone in medical school or residency, because I think part of this is just understanding, when you're in a grooming process to then adopt self-neglect and self-abuse as a lifestyle, this is sort of how it starts. And it's really important that we understand the terminology and the language so that when somebody says something, right away, okay, that's retaliation. Okay, that's like harassment, not discrimination. Oh, that's discrimination. There's subtle differences between all of these things. And I feel like sometimes, because we're so naive and sweet, and they certainly take advantage of young, naive, sweet people in our profession. And once we wise up, they replace us with, nurse practitioners, PAs, and a new crew of young, sweet, clueless, interns and residents. So the sooner we can all wise up as a group, the more collectively we'll be able to salvage our beloved profession.
Final judgment. Licensed to live.
What more can I say, folks? You had it right here on License to Live with Dr. Pamela Wible today. Thank you, Dr. Wible, for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Remember this, fire starters. If you or anyone you know has been dissed, disengaged, dissatisfied, disinvited, like our guest today, please invite them to join us along this journey. Simply go to your favorite podcast player and subscribe to Licensed to Live. Make sure you go to LinkedIn and check me out there. I'm at Dr. Jarrett across all social media. Spell out the word Dr. J-A, 2 R's, E, 1 T. You can see what's going on with me in between episodes and get some of the candids or maybe even some of the outtakes as well. So hang out, connect with me. And until then, stay safe, stand up, speak out, and I'll see you next time.
No matter how disheartening the moment of accusation sounds, how deep the pain of immobilization stabs, or how bleak your future looks, no one can take away your license to live. Keep Dr. Jarrett's expertise handy and unlock your future. Go to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or another podcast player and subscribe right now to Licensed to Live. See you next time.